So let's talk about branding, marketing, and sales in and with the GPT store. Now, before we get into strategy, let's talk about some of the specific GPT store limits. Now, there are some limits on ChatGPT in terms of being able to use your data to train the model. And this is going to be pretty important. Now, again, this may change and it's very likely to change. However, right now, you can take your GPT and there is a place inside GPT where you can limit ChatGPT's ability to train the model. We'll show you that here in a minute. And each file does have specific limits in terms of how big it can actually be or what the capacity is. Yes, you can upload up to 20 files in each GPT, but you do want to know how those limits are going to be expressed for each individual file. And one of the limits is expressed in terms of megabytes. So each individual file can't be any larger than 512 megabytes. Those limits are also expressed in terms of number of words. So if you're going to upload a PDF, you do want to know that there's a maximum of 100,000 words. And that might be give or take a few hundred, but you want to be aware right around 100,000, that's going to be the limit. And then when you are uploading image files, those image files can be up to 20 megabytes. Again, you're probably not going to be able to go right up to the limit. So you just want to be aware that those image files need to be around that size. And then in terms of tokens, and if you count in terms of tokens, when you're looking at your files, your tokens are limited to 2 million per individual file. So again, these are limits that each file can have. Obviously, you can have 20 according to ChatGPT when you are uploading them to your GPT model. And you are also going to be governing the use of those file uploads by your custom instructions. And those instructions are limited to 8,000 characters. And you'll see that's still quite a few characters, but it's not going to be an unlimited number of characters. You will want to be aware of those limits. And this is the place where ChatGPT gives you the opportunity to give some assistance in understanding what the files are supposed to do. And in some cases, going through the wizard is going to do all this for you. But when it comes to uploading your files, it's not going to be possible at that stage. In order to get the wizard to do that, you're going to want to control these things once your model is in process. Now, you may have to iterate the process. You may have to go back to the Create tab from the Configure tab. And in some cases, that may help you. And if you can go back and forth with the chatbot and it can give you some hints on how you can use what it is you have, then you'll want to use it in that way. And so in terms of privacy, you can see here down at the very bottom, if you click on an arrow that says additional settings, you can tick and untick where it says use conversation data in your GPT in order to approve our models. So you can untick that. And again, that may not always be the case. You are going to want to be aware of that. You're going to want to keep track of this, especially if you're going to be doing and having customers interact with your GPT, or if you're going to be doing this for others. This is something that you will want to be aware of. And then also you'll see that this is the instruction area, and this is the area that's going to be limited to 8,000 characters. And so that may not seem like it's enough in some cases. It may not seem that it's a lot. Just so that you'll have an idea, you're looking at a paragraph right here, and that paragraph that you're looking at with spaces is 1,000. So if you understand that, you can probably do about, let's say, 8 times what you see on your screen in terms of inputting characters to the instructions areas. Your custom instructions are limited, but you do have enough space to really tell your GPT exactly what you want done with your files. And so, yes, you'll see that this is the place where you upload the 20 files, and then you've seen the file limits for each of those 20 files. It's important to note that when it comes to the GPT store, that one strategy does not fit all. And so you're not going to find any one strategy that you're going to be able to use regardless of what kind of business that you're in. Now, it's always going to depend on where you are in your business, what stage are you at, what are you producing, and where are you at with your customers. And so if you're going to be putting your customers inside of the GPT store, you may not be at the stage at which putting them in there in order to experience what it is that you have to offer is going to be a good move. So this is not something that everybody has to do. And at the moment, if you have a very good idea to use with a GPT, you can always do that privately. You don't even have to put it in the GPT store. And you could provide that access as a bonus to something. There's nothing stopping you from doing that right now. Now, the GPT store, as of the recording of this, is not yet open. But as I said, you can always, as of right now, you can just give a private link. And I'll show you how to do that here in a minute. You could do that access as part of a paid product. So if you're trying to beef up the access to a paid product, you're trying to beef up the value, you could add a custom GPT where people who are want to do something and they want to experience some level of software, you could add that to one of your paid products. Now understand something, that when you do this, that's a pure monetization strategy. So in other words, you're not dependent on the GPT store. That monetization strategy is part of your marketing, it's part of your sales, and you don't need a GPT store. All you really need is a functioning GPT. And so whatever you start talking about with a GPT store, none of that requires that you do what we've just talked about. And so there are always going to be strategies you can consider if you have an existing brand and you have a product to sell. So there are always going to be ways to use the GPT store as well as GPTs if you're already in the market and your customer is already expecting something from you and you already produce something that you were delivering to customers. You can use the GPT store to enhance those things and to increase the value of anything that you're already offering. And so, as you can see here, this is one of the ways when you save a GPT, you probably realize that one of the things you can do is you can just provide it so that only the people with the link will be able to access the GPT. And when you do that, then that GPT is not going to even appear in the store. And again, there are no requirements for that. You can use that without the store. All you've really got to have is a GPT account, or you've got to have a Plus account in order to create the GPT and to have the account to deliver this. Let's talk about the business model as explained by ChatGPT as of right now. And right now, GPTs are based on engagement. And so you'll look to see one of the things, if you'll look, the GPT will say how many people have engaged with a particular application. And that's really what they're betting on. And that's really what they're trying to do right now. And likely when it comes to them showing a particular GPT, the more somebody interacts with your GPT, the better it's likely to do. Because ultimately, what ChatGPT wants to do is they want to keep people on the platform. And it's important to note when you start talking about getting people to interact with the GPT, you can create an unlimited number. So there are no limits on the number of GPTs that you can create. The only thing that you're limited in is the number of knowledge files you can upload. So when it comes to differentiating yourself and putting things into your GPT that are going to be brand specific, and they're going to be philosophy specific, and they're going to be things that only you can put in there, those things are going to be limited, in the number that you can do per account. So what is OpenAI trying to do with the GPT store and with ChatGPT in general? It's going to be the same as Google's right now. And when you start thinking about what they're trying to do with the GPT store, they're basically trying to do the same thing that Google has been doing over the years. That's keep people on their platform. They want you to engage with their platform. That is what they want. And so you may be placing GPTs on the network so that people can find you in the OpenAI brand. That's one way of being able to use the GPT store, is just being findable. And if that's all you did, and you could be reliably found for your market or your niche or your keyword, then you could very easily use the GPT store just for that purpose, even if you didn't do anything in terms of monetization. What you will be doing, though, is you will be putting your content on there when you upload your content. You do have to understand that eventually it's likely that that content will be used to train models. And so it may not be as unique anymore once you put that content on the GPT system. And so you want to consider that. If your content is proprietary, it's something you came up with, it's something you taught, it's something that's specific to your business, you will be training the model. And so that model will then be able to take your content and use that in other places. And so that may be a consideration you want to make. And maybe you do want to create a GPT, and maybe you don't want to create a GPT. Maybe you do want to make it public, maybe you don't. And so the business model that they're undertaking is an audience business model. And you might, well, what's an audience business model? It's the same as YouTube. YouTube wants you to be on the platform. So everything they're doing is try to keep you on YouTube and ultimately to serve you advertising. Now, that may not be what OpenAI is eventually going to do. Maybe they'll never serve advertising, but they're trying to keep you on the platform. That's what engagement means. If they want people and they're going to monetize based on engagement, then they're going to reward engagement. So the more people that are engaged with your GPT, that is what they are going to reward. That's the measuring bar. That's the standard. And so that's what you're going to need to create. You're going to need to create things that are useful to people and that people want to come back to over and over again in order to use. It's same as Facebook, TikTok, or Instagram. It's an audience business model. So you have an audience, you have you have a group of people that want to interact with what it is that you have created. That is basically the model. So if you understand those business models, if you understand YouTube, for Facebook creators, people who create content for Facebook or TikTok or Instagram, if you understand basically what those models are, in a large sense, that's really what OpenAI is creating, but they're going to create it based on usage of a particular aspect of their model. And so they're going to give you a piece of their model in order to interact with the public. And they're thinking, well, if you can create something more interesting than maybe we can at OpenAI, and you're going to keep people on the platform, we're going to reward you for that in some way. Now, they've not really talked about exactly what that monetization is going to be, but it is coming. And so part of their subscription, their revenue, though, is going to be subscription income. That's going to be the income that you pay them to keep a ChatGPT Plus account. And here's what they're ultimately going to want you to do. Now, you're going to be limited in the number and the way in which you can create unique GPTs, because that's going to be limited by the number of files that you can create or that you can upload. And so they're going to believe that if you can generate income by having people interact with your GPTs and that you're making them peculiar to what it is you're doing, what they're banking on is that you're going to need to create multiple ones and that you will eventually run out of space with just one account. And so they're believing, and that's why they've created a team account, that you'll eventually need a team account. That if you monetize, you run out of, let's say you run out of space, you're uploading files, you've run out of your 100 gigabytes, that you will eventually need a second account in order to do more GPTs. And so, when you start hitting limits or tokens limits, you can do 20 files per GPT, 100 gigabytes per account, then you might need a second account if you're going to have more monetizable GPTs. And so the question is always going to be, are the GPTs that you're creating, are they generating that kind of cash flow to justify that? And that's really what you're going to have to consider. And so the question is going to be, when you start thinking about, am I going to create a monetizable GPT? Am I going to get a second account? And the way to look at this is, what can you not produce in your business right now that your market or your business or your niche requires from you? And that's the way you want to approach GPTs, creating something that your business cannot create in any other way. And this is especially true if you have existing customers. And so again, you're seeing here that OpenAI is going to be basing the entire thing on usage. And so when your customer or your, if you want to call it your visitor, is using your GPT, then OpenAI is going to consider that in terms of how they intend to compensate you or to give you access to monetization based on that. Now, one of the aspects of fundamental marketing you're going to be able to do by creating your GPT is to enhance your USP, your unique selling proposition. And so if anything you're doing in your business is something that requires specific knowledge and insight, it's unique to the market, you can offer that knowledge and that insight as part of your custom GPT. And you're going to do that by making sure that you program the GPT by uploading knowledge files. Remember, you can upload 20 per GPT. You're also going to do that once those knowledge files are uploaded. You're going to need to tell your GPT exactly how to use those knowledge files. And so it's not going to be enough to upload a knowledge file. You're going to have to tell the GPT exactly how to do that. And of course, what you can also do is you can actually have your GPT interact with an API. And so if you're doing that, you're going to also have to do in the description section, you're going to have to tell the GPT how to interact with the API. But those two things together help you to create something unique. Now, if all you're doing is you're just going through the create stage and you're going to have ChatGPT manipulate a few things, that's fine. I mean, that requires a skill of prompting, and that's certainly going to be viable, but that's not necessarily going to differentiate you over time. What's going to differentiate you over time are these enhancements you're going to add, which are going to be your knowledge files, as well as your interaction with another database, if you choose to use that. You can make a real unique GPT that does produce something that your customer cannot get elsewhere. And so that's really what you're going to be doing when you're creating a GPT. You're trying to enhance a reason that your customer needs to come back to you and can't go to anybody else to get. Now, if you understand how APIs work, this is going to help you. And you don't necessarily have to do that now. There's a GPT called Action GPT, and it'll assist you in how to integrate GPT. But over time, understanding how an API works is going to help you when you create a unique GPT with the integration of APIs. Let's talk about APIs for a second. And as you know, when you go inside of the GPT creation screen, and here we are on the configure side actually, if we go to configure our GPT once it's created, you're going to see down at the very bottom there's a link there that says create a new action. And so what we can do when we click that button is we can then add in an action, and that action is where we're going to interact with the API. And that's really where, having an understanding of what an API actually does is going to help us create something unique. And so you'll also see here, though, that one thing that you can do is you can click this button, you can get help from Actions GPT. And if you click that button, that's going to give you access to a different GPT inside of ChatGPT. And basically, you're going to interact with this GPT. You're going to ask it for specific recommendations. But basically, this GPT is going to tell you how to implement a GPT. So if you know nothing about APIs, it's going to show you how to implement an API inside of your GPT. And so you can go through that process if you know nothing. Now, still though, you eventually want to know how to integrate APIs. You do need to know something. And maybe what you can do is you can have the API, you can have the GPT kind of prompt you through this. But obviously, knowing what it is you're doing is going to assist you in being able to create something that's going to be unique using the APIs. Now, I'm going to tell you about what a business model that's possible. It's not necessarily a business model that is set in stone. It may or may not work, and it may or may not even be something that you can do. It is a potential. It's a potential aspect of being able to offer GPTs and be able to create them. But you will need to understand what OpenAI's policy is going to be concerning these things. And let's talk about that here in a minute. You can create GPTs that are complex, right? When you understand what an API does. And if you can do that and serve a purpose for a customer, what you may be able to do is you may be able to go to the open market, and not talking about the GPT market. I'm talking about going to the marketplace and saying to people, well, hey, I'll create a GPT for you and I'll house it on my account. But here's the thing about this. This is not something you just want to go do, right? You don't want to go offering your services as a GPT creator right now until you fully understand the terms of service. So you need to understand the terms of service of OpenAI, of ChatGPT, of custom GPTs. You need to understand that fully. That's very important before you go offering your services. Now, again, this is a potential business model. It may be something that you can do, and it's one thing you want to keep your eye on going forward. And so if you do this, you're going to have to know some programming and some API. And so even though the chatbot could lead you through it, knowing the API, as we said, is really going to help you. And then understanding prompting, obviously, is going to help you too. You do need to understand if you're going to get the GPT to actually do what you want it to do, you need to know how to talk to machines, AIs in particular, and learning how to prompt. Now, here's what's important about this, and it could be one of the uses. It could be a potential use for team account. Now, again, they've not really said anything about this, but it could be a potential use of a team account. So basically, you could actually create your own account, and one of your team accounts could be a client account, right? And if the customer doesn't really, interact correctly, or they don't pay you, I mean, obviously, you can turn that account off from your account, right? And so, in so doing, let's say that you decide that this is going to be something you want to undertake. You want to offer your services. You're going to do this for someone. It's probably a good idea to do this by subscription, and that's just in case something goes sideways. So that just kind of something you should be thinking about. And then ultimately, here's the most important thing, and it bears restating. The rules about this are not clear on the OpenAI platform. You need clarity before you can offer it as a service. So don't depend on any teacher, anyone who's teaching you how necessarily to use this or how to do this or how to offer it as a service. You make sure you doubly understand OpenAI's terms as clearly as you can. Make sure you understand their privacy issues. You've got to understand these things in your own language. You've got to make sure you understand these things for yourself. So don't depend on anyone in terms of what they say about how this is going to work. And so again, you're looking here at the team account. And basically what you're going to be able to do then is you're going to be able then to upgrade the team. As you can see here, that means that you can have an account connected to your account. And so it's really for collaboration. It's not necessarily for client work, but it could be used that way. And of course, you can just turn that account off when it's time, or if you think that person is not necessarily going to compensate you, or maybe if you do as what was suggested, and a customer is on a monthly payment plan, and let's say that their subscription lapses, then you can turn off access to the team account that you have given them. Now, one important aspect of this is going to be privacy. And don't think that you're just automatically covered because API's got all the liability. They don't. And so for your customers' privacy, you're really responsible. Your customer, let's say, or your customer's customer does customer input, and something happens, there's a breach, you could be on the hook. And so if you're going to just give people access to a GPT, you're going to have to cover all your bases with customer privacy. And again, it's going to be your responsibility, just as it would be with any other situation. And this is especially true if you decide you're going to create GPTs as a service. Now, again, if that's a route you're going to go, it's a possible business model. And if you do choose that, you also have to work out the privacy issues on the ChatGPT platform for your customer as well as for yourself. And of course, some of these issues are still being worked out by OpenAI and the AI community at large. And if you want to make sure that you're going to have this, creating GPTs or the GPT store as a significant aspect of your business model, you need to keep up with OpenAI's research. And they put all of that research right there on their website. You should be reading all of their papers, and you should understand where they are going. Again, now, if you're going to be building on this platform and it becomes a significant part of your income, you need to know and understand what it's saying and where it's going. You need to read and understand all of the OpenAI help docs. Now, there's a finite amount of information there, so it's not an impossible task. You should know those help docs backwards and forwards. That's the only way you're going to be able to offer this as a service, or even give your customer access to a GPT that you create. You should know them. You should also understand, now this is more probably optional than the other two things, but Microsoft has a significant stake in OpenAI. You should understand their research on AI. And you can find that at learn.microsoft.com. You can have those papers summarized over there at minimum, but you should have your hand on the pulse of where AI is going. And of course, you should be an aficionado and understand where AI research is going in general. Like, there's a lot of discussion on AGI, and you should have your hands on the pulse. You should know where it's going, especially if you're going to be building on this platform for the sake of your customers. Let's talk a little bit more about marketing fundamentals and the GPT store. Now, obviously, one of the things that you can do with the GPT, now not necessarily with the GPT store, but you can definitely do upsells and cross-sells, and you should be doing them. And so part of the way that you can use a GPT, we talked about that before, is that you can add that GPT as a bonus to an upsell or a cross sell, and it may be that you can offer it kind of separately. If you think about this, one of the ways that you can execute this is you can make a public version of your GPT and you can make it public in the GPT store. However, you can also have a private version that's a little more enhanced. It may have more of your knowledge files in there. It may have your knowledge files and API in there, your private version. And so if people want that private version, they may have to come and pay you extra, or they may have to get a certain product, or they may have to get access to something where you give them that access to the private version of your GPT. And so basically the public version can be free, or it can be at a price in your GPT store, but the private version is going to be whatever form of payment that you want. And so that's one way of being able to execute using the GPT store as part of an upsell or cross-sell strategy. Of course, if you create a private version, and you can always use it as a bribe. And so if you've got something that you know works, that's going to be pretty awesome, that if you want to give it to some people and you want them to get it as part of a bonus or something they're doing, you can have a public version, right? And people are going to always have free access to that version, but the private version, again, could be more enhanced, and it could be used as a bribe in order to get people to opt in to your subscriber list. And of course, partnering and collaboration, that's what the team account is going to be about. You should be doing educational marketing. And this is an excellent way of being able to take some of the processes and things that you are doing to educate your customers and making them part of, and making them part of a specific channel where they can get it as part of a GPT. So whatever your core principles are, whatever your current philosophy is, you should be teaching it. You should be using a GPT in order to teach that current philosophy. It's an important way of being able to reach out to your customer, right? It's an important way of your being able to make sure that your customer fully understands what it is that you believe, what it is that will benefit them, and how it is that you go about doing that. And this is another way of being able to get people deeper into your brand and your philosophy. And so when you start talking about using using the GPT in order to educate your customer, the area in which you will need to focus is training your GPT. And you might have to do it across several GPTs, because you're only going to be able to use 20 knowledge files at a time. And if you can upload them all to, say, the one GPT in order to do one aspect, the most important element is what you tell the GPT to do with your files, right? You're going to make your GPT unique by uploading files to that GPT, but that's not necessarily going to get your customer to use those files in a certain way. In fact, those files are going to be invisible to your customer. Your GPT is going to become useful, and it's going to become unique because you trained it. And so this is the area that you're going to need to want to focus. Again, if you can train your GPT and you can implement and you can integrate APIs, you will then be able to create something that's truly unique that your customer must come back to over and over to see you for. And finally, there are going to be some issues that you will have to perpetually take note of and keep track of. And one of the areas is going to be the litigious nature of ChatGPT and how publishers will feel about how models have been trained in the past, how models are currently being trained, and all of these things will need to be settled. This may change the landscape of how ChatGPT operates, as well as how you're building your business on top of GPTs. Now, as of right now, there really is no real effect, and it isn't expected that these cases will change dramatically the way the GPT store operates. However, it could. And so you will need to make sure that you're keeping track of exactly what's going on here in this part of the process for ChatGPT. Now, it is more important to keep track of the research, as well as where OpenAI Microsoft and ChatGPT are going. However, this is going to be a part of the process going forward and something that you will want to periodically search to determine how this issue is progressing on a legal basis.